Hello everybody, my name is Ludwig and this is Survivor Overview. The survivor I'll be reviewing is Captain, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Captain is a unique survivor that can control the battlefield with utility and damage, but he lacks mobility. So he may struggle vertically jumping up. He doesn't have a lot of mobility. He might have problems with dealing with groups of enemies and getting away from enemies. He can't dodge very well, so you would need items to mitigate that, but besides that, he has high utility and damage. As it says, his Umbra title is Tired Veteran. His health is 110 plus 33 per level. His health regen, Drizzle, Rainstorm, and Monsoon are the difficulties in order. 1.5 per second plus 0.3 per level. 1 per second plus 0.2 per level. 0.6 per second plus 0.12 per level. His damage is 12 plus 2.4 per level. His speed is 7 meters per second. His armor is 0. On Drizzle, he gets 70. His unlock, you just need to beat the game. So on stage 5, you need to take the Primordial Teleporter without rotating it. As long as you just take it like normal, you just do your boss event, Teleporter stage, and then you defeat the boss and wait. Then you take the Teleporter just like normal, and you head to Commencement, just beat the final boss, and then escape successfully, and you will unlock Captain with the challenge washed away. His ending phrase, escaped and so he left with a new tale to tell. And if you obliterate at the obelisk, vanished and so he vanished free from a lifetime of paperwork. His lore. A rescue mission. The old man leaned forward, scanning the document slid over his desk. His eyes paused on a collection of words near the bottom. UES, contact light. Yes. He continued to read the document. The safe travels for a rescue mission. As one of the few surviving captains of the old colony ships, he knew all the designations by memory, and the safe travels was not a rescue ship. Any armaments? No. We'll have to fix that. With a sigh, he stood up. His prosthetics tugged at his joints. Despite being lighter than his original limbs, they always felt heavy. And let me guess, top secret, right? Yes. He gave out another sigh. They're always top secret, but a small smile crept onto his face. He glanced up to his old radio helmet. He's been bored in retirement anyways. Alright, onto his passive. Captain's passive is Defensive Microbots. It's a passive description. He passively gains Microbots that shoot down nearby enemy projectiles. Drones are also given Microbots. So, it's his main defensive tool. The Microbots will recharge at a rate of 0.5 seconds and can shoot down one projectile. The more attack speed you have, such as syringes, will increase the recharge rate, allowing them to basically shoot down more projectiles faster, which is really nice. It really helps against enemies like Lemurians and brass contraptions due to them it negates their attacks before they even get to you. Some unconventional attacks that really wouldn't be considered projectiles can be negated by this passive, like the mini mushroom, spore clouds, and fire pools, the lunar chimeras, exploders, fiery blazes, which are the enemies on Commencement. They blow up and they leave like a pool of fire. I guess that can be completely negated by defensive Microbots. I didn't know that. So it also applies to drones. So buying drones is not the worst idea, especially with captains, just because drones typically die so quickly that it's kind of just buying drones is like extra. So with this passive though, drones now get the Microbots, allowing them to basically survive for longer, thus helping you in the long run. His primary is the Vulcan Shotgun. It has a proc coefficient of 0.75 times 8, or 0.75. The description, fire a blast of pellets that deal 8 times 120% damage. Charging the attack narrows the spread. So if you hold the attack button, it will charge up and you can shoot it, and it's more accurate. The pellets you can hit things from a further distance by charging the attack. Otherwise, it's like a typical shotgun. It has a blast that shoots 8 pellets, and they kind of have a spread around, and it's pretty good. It works very well with the tri-tip dagger and like Shatter Spleen and the Shattering Justice due to each projectile individually having a proc coefficient of 0.75, meaning it's more likely to proc those effects, and then you would stack them very quickly with like tri-tip dagger due to bleed. So it's pretty good, and it can do some very high damage, and the biggest thing is it really works well with attack speed. The more attack speed you have, like syringes will really help you just do a ton of damage and just consistently just mow through basically any enemy in your way. So getting some syringes is highly recommended. And critical strikes are rolled per attack, not per pellet. So if the attack is a crit, it will all 8 pellets will critically strike at once. So you're doing double damage. So crit classes like lens makers are very, very good as well. His secondary power, Tazer, is a secondary with a cooldown of 6 seconds and a proc coefficient of 1. Description: shocking, fire fast Tazer that deals 100% damage, travels further if bounced. This honestly is not very great. It's useful early on because it can stun enemies that aren't bosses, and it has a small area of effect, but it's not exactly... Later on, it's not super useful. Like, it's not terrible, but it's not very great. So typically I just kind of just use it, but it's not gonna really do anything if you forget to use it. So it doesn't do anything against bosses. It can stun enemies that are pretty annoying, like Lemurians and stuff like that, which is pretty nice, and that's about all. Pretty simple. For his utility, now we get to the Orbital Strikes. Type: utility, cooldown 11 seconds, proc coefficient of 1 per probe. Description: stunning, request up to 3 orbital probes from the UES safe travels. Each probe deals 1000 damage. So Orbital Probe, you basically get a targeting reticle, and you get to send down 3 different separate orbital probes, and there will be a visual effect showing where the area that it will land. You can quickly just pull this up and click 3 times, and they will all eventually slam down, and you'll basically get an orbital artillery blast. They do a lot of damage, they stun, they have an area of effect that can hit multiple enemies. It's really good for single target burst damage. You can put all the probes on one enemy and just watch them basically die, or you can put them on groups of enemies around you and deal with, if you're getting surrounded, and you can deal with them that way. The biggest thing is to remember that if you use one probe and let's say you cancel the ability, it will still go on cooldown, so be careful. Also, it does not do friendly fire, so you can just sit in your own probe and just let it land straight on you and you will not die. So it does no damage, so very nice. It's extremely reliable and just allows you to just do a lot of... It's this big damage ability. It allows him to you can basically send a probe from halfway across the map. Now the biggest thing is they take a little bit of time before they land and deal damage. So let's say an enemy, you put the probe right on them and then they move out of the way. By the time the probe lands, the enemy might be completely out of the way of the probe, and basically you do no damage. So you just try to account for that, but typically you're going to be using this on bosses or anything basically in general, so it's not too hard to account for that anyways. Other than that, it's pretty good. Next is the real nuke. The previous one is like if you had a artillery strike from a cannon or some type of mortar, basically. This is basically a nuke. His second one is the OGM 72 Diablo Strike. It's a utility with a 40-second cooldown, a proc coefficient of 1, and has a description: stunning. Request a kinetic strike for the UES safe travels. After 20 seconds, it deals 40,000 damage to all characters. So this has a radius. You will see it just like the previous Orbital Strike or Orbital Probe. And that radius, anything in that radius, when it lands, it will deal 40,000 damage. Now, if you are a captain or a friendly, it will actually only deal 20,000 damage because it halves the damage for friendly fire. But that's still a lot, and I wouldn't recommend sitting in front of it. But it's very good, but it has a very long cooldown, and you have to basically wait 20 seconds. So typically you're going to use this. What I don't like about it is that it's not as consistent as having the Orbital Probe. Like, I can quest 3 probes and just continue using this actively pretty much throughout the entire stage. But for the Diablo Strike, I basically just have to use it during the boss or some type of boss event, which is really good. But by the time this, like, if I need to quickly deal with a group of enemies or a bunch of Lemurians, this is not really going to do anything. It's going to take 20 seconds, and the Orbital Probe is much faster, and I can still continue using it later. So I can use it on small stuff and big stuff. This, you kind of have to use it on big stuff. You can use it on small stuff, but you're still going to be waiting 20 seconds. But other than that, it does a lot of damage. So if you just put it on a boss or put it in an area, think the boss will spawn, and then just go do something. As long as the boss does not move, the boss can just move out of the way. So just be careful of that. Like if you get an imp overlord, this is probably not going to be very fun to do because they move a lot. But if you get something that doesn't move as much, like Beetle Queens or Stone Titans or something like that, it's not really too bad. The biggest thing is just if they move out of the way, you basically just wasted 20 seconds. So, and it has a super long cooldown. So it's very powerful, but you need to time it carefully and you need to position it so that it actually strikes the enemy. To get the Diablo Strike, you need to do the Smush Challenge as Captain kill the final boss using a supply beacon. This is a very... I don't even know how I got it. I just threw down... So the strike, you have to use a supply beacon, which is another one of his abilities, which will go over his special. And they do damage, but it's not... If you kill the boss, let's say you have like ATGs, if anything besides the beacon kills the boss, you will not get the challenge. So try to avoid items that have like on hit effects, like I guess bleed might kill him, or sticky bombs, or Reynolds bands, or ATGs, anything like that could. So you're gonna have to be careful. You're probably just going to try to get to the last phase of the boss, of the main boss, through after stage 5 and go to commencement. And you'll probably just have to really just try to be patient, but you only get really 2 tries because you only get 2 supply beacons. So you basically have to deal the final strike with a supply beacon, and you only get 2 of those, which are similar to the strikes, but they're separate. Speaking of special, there are multiple types, and you get 2 of them. So you get Orbital Supply. This is the Orbital Supply Beacon, his special. It has no cooldown. It has a proc coefficient of 0. Description requests a permanent supply beacon can only be requested twice per stage. So you pick one of each. So at the top there, from the order, the healing one in the green, the blue one is shocking, the ammo-based one is the resupply, and the right of that is the gear icon, is the hacking one. So you start the game with the first and the second, and later on you unlock the third and the fourth. To unlock the resupply beacon, you need to do the Captain Wanderlust challenge. Visit 10 different environments in a single run. For the fourth beacon, the hacking one, you need to purchase the TC-280 prototype drone on Rally Point Delta, which is a rare drone spawn that doesn't always spawn, but if it does, you just need to buy it and you get the challenge. So first of all, beacons will take a few moments to arrive, and then they will then deploy after they arrive, similar to the Orbital Probe and the Orbital Strikes and stuff. You will have a targeting reticule, and then the primary skill button will do the first beacon, and the secondary will call the second beacon. Once you've used both beacons, you cannot use them again that stage. You will have to wait till the next stage. So now you get to choose what beacons you want. So you could bring 2 health ones, or you could bring 2 shock ones. You could bring 2 hacking. You could bring 2 of any of the beacons, or you can mix and match. You could bring a health and shock. You could bring shock and hacking. You could bring resupply and hacking, or you could just bring 2 of any of them. Basically, you'll just have to choose which ones you want. The health one will heal in an area around it. Any survivor in its radius. The shock one will periodically shock enemies around it as well. The resupply will resupply your equipment up to 3 times, where you can use your equipment. It will instantly refresh your equipment, so you can use it again, but only 3 times. And the hacking will lower the cost of any sort of shop item or chest or anything like that. So you can use... a good use of the hacking beacon is to use it on stage 4, which guarantees a red item. There's usually a chest, and you can find that chest and just put the hacking beacon on it, and it will eventually go down to basically 0 cost over time. So, and that's really about it for the beacons. They're very nice and very useful, but they do have a limit. They're very powerful, but they can only be used twice in a stage. So, for notable items, just like before, items are varied, and there's no real there's so many builds you can make, and I can't go over all. I'm not going to go over every single item in the game. There's so many of them, and the biggest thing is find items that fit your playstyle and then use them. It doesn't really matter if they're the best or not. Use items that you think are fun and that you find interesting, and that's all. So these are just items that I typically run or I think are usually pretty good, but remember, if based on your playstyle, adjust and pick what items you think are good or interesting. And just because I don't have an item on here does not mean it's bad. It just means I didn't have room or I didn't fit it in here somehow. So, but the most important rule is to have fun and pick items that fit your playstyle. So, for survivability, as normal, the tougher times, Topaz Brooch, Infusions, Harvester Scythe is pretty good for extra health, Infusions, max HP. The Stealth Kit I don't typically grab, but it is useful sometimes. Fuel cells don't really belong here, but fuel cells depend on your equipment, but in general they're always good anyways. For damage, crit glasses are always great, just like we talked about his Vulcan Shotgun. If he crits, it's per attack, not per pellet. So that means the more, if you stack lens makers and you get like 9 or 10 of them, every time you crit, you're basically going to crit every single attack. You're dealing double damage, and at the same time, every single pellet is going to crit too, instead of, yeah. So crits literally make all of his pellets just crit. So instead of individual. So you're just guaranteed if you have enough lens makers to crit and do a ton of damage with his shotgun. Syringes are a really good item on him. He attacks pretty slowly, but once you increase his attack speed with, if you mix that lens makers, syringes, and let's say daggers, you're going to be doing tons of damage because you're going to attack super quickly. All your pellets will crit, and you would be doing bleed every single pellet. You will just stack bleed, and the faster you stack bleed, the faster enemies just evaporate. So it's very, very powerful, stacking crit glasses, syringes, and bleed, or tri-tip daggers, as due to each pellet individually being able to proc, you can proc bleed very quickly. And with more attack speed, you're just going to be, everything will die. Crowbars, more damage, always useful. Armor piercing rounds, boss damage, always useful. ATGs, because every separate attack, every separate individual pellet has a chance to proc, which is a 0.75 chance to proc. You're going to get a lot of use out of ATGs. They're going to be able to just fire missiles constantly. The Bandolier is really good due to the fact that you can reset your cooldowns, which is really, really useful for his utility, i.e. the Orbital Probe. Being able to, basically, you can Orbital Probe, grab an ammo pack, and then Orbital Probe, and call down 3 strikes again, and just basically nuke the whole map through Orbital Strikes. Predator Instincts will increase your attack speed further based on critical strikes, so this works really well, pairs well nicely with the lens makers, allowing you to, it increases your attack speed. So as before with the syringes, the faster you attack, the more it's just the more damage you're going to be doing, etc. For mobility, as normal, the energy drinks are nice for sprint speed. The feathers, double jump, or even further. Wax quails are nice. I typically grab feathers over quail, depending on, but their quail is fine too. And Berserker Pauldron, because I didn't have enough room to put in damage, Berserker Pauldron will increase your attack speed and your movement speed at the same time if you kill 4 enemies in like 6 seconds or something. So very, very useful, but it also kind of belongs in the damage and mobility tier, since they both, it gives you a faster attack speed, which increases your damage, and it increases your sprint speed, so, or your movement speed. For area of effect, as normal, the gasoline is always reliable. Sticky bombs, due to the fact that each pellet will proc, as a 0.75 proc coefficient, allowing you to pretty much put a bunch of sticky bombs on them. The Will-O-Wisp, always useful. Ukulele, the 2 bands, Renaud and Kajaros, due to the fact that he has the Orbital Strike, allowing him to do a bunch of damage, and then proc the both band effects. For boss items, Splatter Spleen works well, just like I was talking about Bleed earlier, being able to crit. So let's say you stack crit glasses, and now all of your attacks bleed, so you can just get Splatter Spleen and Lens Makers, and now critical strikes will bleed enemies, bleeding enemies then explode, etc. More damage equals enemies dead equals you win. So Little Disciple is not as good, but I put it there because it's useful anyways, because you're always moving anyways, since sprinting is always something you will be doing, so you're always going to get damage out of that. The Halcyon Seed is if you do the Aurelionite event and you always get it, and that's just a nice little bonus. So for legendary items, there's a few. The Hard Light Afterburner is a very, very powerful one on Captain, specifically because of his utility. The Hard Light Afterburner gives you +2 uses of your utility. And due to Captain's utility being his Orbital Strikes, that means you get either 3 nukes, if you have the Diablo Strike, or you get 9 Orbital Strike, Orbital Probes, which allow you to basically call down 9 separate, like, artillery strikes if you have the default utility. So, Hard Light Afterburner, amazing DPS item for Captain. The next is the Survivors of the Void DLC item, which is a legendary. It is the spare drone parts. This will give you a Colonel Drone Man, I think is his name. It's pretty funny, and basically, in short, it allows your drones to fire missiles, and it basically increases drone effectiveness, and in general increases your defensive effectiveness in general. Overall, it pairs very well with Captain's kit. And then next to that is your standard, the 57 Leaf Clover for the rerolls, Dios for the extra life. Shattering Justice pairs nicely because of the Vulcan Shotgun with each of the pellets proccing individually. So you can easily stack the armor reduction. The Pocket ICBM is nice in general as well. It makes missiles from any missile effects you have, or it gives you more missiles. And then the Brilliant Behemoth, all your attacks explode, and the fact that each of your pellets are separate procs, you basically get a bunch of explosions. So very nice. For equipment, disposable missile launcher is typically pretty good. The Milky Chrysalisk I use it mainly to skip the pillars on stage 5. Speaking of stage 5, or not stage 5, commencement after stage 5. So the final boss instead of looping. So Chrysalisk is good for that. Speaking of that, you can skip the pillars if you use the Diablo Strike, so his secondary nuke, basically. You can actually propel yourself up and skip the pillars on commencement if you basically put the strike and so it lands on you. You will take damage, but if you are careful, you will not be insta-killed. So because there's 1-hit protection. So if you take damage right after that, you will probably die, but just be careful of that. But you can skip the pillars on commencement with the secondary utility, not the first one. The one that is the nuke that you have to wait 20 seconds. Primordial Cube is nice. You can put a bunch of enemies together and then use your utility, so the nuke, or more likely the Orbital Probe, and then you can just burst damage and kill everything. Praeon Accelerator or Accumulator, very good. Item you get from Rally Point Delta from the time chest, if the time security chest, if you have gotten to Rally Point Delta before 10 minutes, you can just get a free Praeon Accumulator. Jade Elephant gives you armor, might be helpful early on, depends. If you're having trouble surviving, you get a bunch of armor, which then reduces the damage you take for a certain amount of time. It's very nice. Lunar, Gesture of the Drowned is typically pretty good. There are other lunar items, but I couldn't think of too many that might work well with him. I guess Purity could work pretty well if you stack Purities and then do a bunch of utility skill. I guess that could also work, but then you might kind of lose out on the main damage with your Vulcan Shotgun because it lowers your luck. So for void items, this is sort of like some items that could be pretty good on him, and that's really about it. In conclusion, Captain is a unique survivor with a lot of utility and damage, but he lacks mobility, which can cause him to struggle early on with being swarmed or evading enemy attacks. Once you get a few items, though, you can mitigate this downside, leaving you with a character that can deal a tremendous amount of damage with his orbital probes and shotgun while supporting his allies and himself. Captain works very well with crit items, such as lens makers, because of his shotgun critting. All pellets will crit once you get enough crit chance, because it's per attack instead of per pellet. He also works very well with bleed items like tri-tip daggers and splatter spleen due to the fact that each of his attacks, each of the pellets of his shotgun will separately proc, allowing you to very quickly stack bleed. Also, syringes increases attack speed, making his damage even greater. And other than that, he's a really fun and unique survivor, and I enjoy playing him a lot. A funny thing is that he is basically the polar opposite of Mercenary, which I went over in the previous overview. Mercenary is very quick and mobile. Captain is the complete opposite, but Captain is a sort of like, he starts slower with less mobility, but later on he becomes really, really powerful, and that's a lot of fun too. So give Captain a try sometime, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun with him. But I think he's great, and he's very fun, and I will see you all in the next video. I thank you all for watching, and have a good night.